World's most infamous missing persons mysteries.
A German prisoner has been identified as a new suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
She was just 3 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. And then, in the space of a single evening, she was gone. No body was ever found. No conviction was ever made.
Please, if you have Madeleine, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
And nearly 2 decades later, her parents still wake up every morning not knowing what happened to their little girl. This is not just a missing child case. This is the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history, and it still has no definitive ending. The night everything changed, it was the evening of May 3, 2007. The McCann family was on holiday in Praia da Luz, a quiet and sun-drenched coastal town in southern Portugal. Kate and Gerry McCann, both doctors from Leicestershire, England, had brought their 3 children, 3-year-old Madeleine and her 2-year-old twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, to the Ocean Club Resort in the Algarve region. Several close friends and their children were staying at the same resort. By all accounts, it had been a pleasant holiday. That evening, like most evenings during the trip, the adults put the children to bed and walked about 55 meters to a tapas restaurant within the resort complex to have dinner together. The group had worked out a system to check on the children roughly every 30 minutes throughout the night. At just after 9 p.m., Gerry McCann walked back to the apartment and checked on the children. Everything appeared fine. He returned to dinner. At approximately 10 p.m., Kate McCann went to check. What she found changed everything. Madeleine's bed was empty, the window was open, and her daughter was gone. Kate ran back to the restaurant and raised the alarm. In the chaos that followed, friends scattered across the resort searching desperately. Local police were called, but the response was disorganized. The apartment, which was a critical crime scene, was not properly secured in the hours that followed. Potential forensic evidence was compromised almost immediately. Portugal's police chief would later admit that forensic clues may have been lost because the scene was not adequately protected that night. In the days that followed, the world's media descended on the tiny seaside town. Journalists, photographers, and television crews arrived from across the globe. Madeleine's photograph, her wide blue eyes, and the distinctive dark mark in her right iris became one of the most recognizable images on the planet. World leaders, celebrities, and heads of state expressed their sympathy. Vigils were held across Europe. The search was truly global, and yet, despite it all, not a single confirmed trace of Madeleine was found. A web of suspects and theories. From the very beginning, the investigation was a complicated and often contradictory affair. The Portuguese police, known as the Polícia Judiciária, were under enormous international pressure. Within days, a British expat named Robert Murat, who lived near the resort, was named as a formal suspect after an anonymous tip. His home was searched extensively. He was questioned repeatedly. After years of scrutiny, he was eventually cleared of all involvement. His reputation had been badly damaged for nothing. One witness, Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns who was also checking on children that evening, reported seeing a man carrying a young blonde girl away from the apartment block at around 9:10 p.m. This sighting became a major focus of the investigation. Years later, however, a British man came forward and explained that he had been the man in question, carrying his own sleeping daughter back from a nearby crèche. The sighting, which had consumed thousands of hours of investigative time, turned out to be a dead end. Then came a dramatic and deeply painful development. In September 2007, Portuguese detectives named both Kate and Gerry McCann as formal suspects in their own daughter's disappearance. Investigators claimed to have found suspicious DNA evidence in a car the family had rented more than 3 weeks after Madeleine vanished. The theory circulated by some Portuguese investigators was that Madeleine had died in an accident inside the apartment, possibly after being sedated, and that her parents had concealed her body. Kate McCann later stated that detectives pressured her to make a false confession. The couple denied any wrongdoing firmly and consistently. They flew back to England with the twins in September 2007. In July 2008, Portugal's Attorney General shelved the entire investigation and lifted the suspect status from the McCanns and Robert Murat. No evidence was ever found to support the accusation against the parents. A former Portuguese detective who had publicly championed the theory that the McCanns were responsible was later found guilty of libeling the family in connection with a book he had written and was ordered to pay substantial damages. By 2011, the British government stepped in. Scotland Yard launched its own formal review of the case, known as Operation Grange, at the request of then Home Secretary Theresa May. Detectives reviewed over 40,000 documents from British and foreign law enforcement agencies. More than 1,000 witness statements were taken. Over 8,000 potential sightings were investigated. Hundreds of sex offenders were examined. The total cost of Operation Grange would eventually exceed 13 million British pounds. Among the many theories explored, investigators looked at whether Madeleine had been taken by a burglar who had targeted what they thought was an unoccupied apartment. There had been a significant rise in local burglaries in the months before Madeleine disappeared, including 2 incidents in the McCann's own building in the 17 days prior to May 3rd. Others theorized that Madeleine may have been taken by an organized criminal network, with some private investigators suggesting human trafficking rings had been operating in the area at the time. None of these threads ever led to a definitive conclusion. The prime suspect in the search that continues, in June 2020, came the most significant development the case had seen in over a decade. German prosecutors publicly announced that they had identified a new primary suspect, a German national named Christian Brachner. Prosecutors stated they had concrete evidence linking him to Madeleine's disappearance, and that they believed she was dead. Brachner had spent a decade living and working in the Algarve region, operating as an odd-job man. His criminal history was extensive, including convictions for child sexual abuse and drug trafficking. At the time of the announcement, he was already serving a prison sentence in Germany for the rape of a 72-year-old American woman that had occurred in Portugal. Brachner denied any involvement. His lawyer noted he claimed to have an alibi for the night of May 3, 2007. Despite the German prosecutor's confidence, formal charges directly linked to Madeleine's disappearance were never filed. Legal complications arose over jurisdictional questions relating to which German court had authority over the case. In 2024, a separate trial found Brachner not guilty of 5 unrelated sexual offenses committed in Portugal. He was released from prison in September 2025 after completing his rape sentence. A court imposed conditions on his release, including an ankle monitor and regular reporting to probation services, though a higher court later allowed him to leave Germany. In 2025, a fresh search was launched around land connected to Brachner near Portugal's Algarve region. Dozens of German law enforcement agents scoured undergrowth and an abandoned building near a cottage Brachner had previously used. Police declined to release details about what specifically prompted the new search. Items were reportedly recovered from the area, though authorities confirmed it was too early to determine whether any of them were connected to Madeleine. As of the time this script was written, Madeleine McCann has never been found. No one has ever been charged or convicted in connection with her disappearance. Operation Grange, now reduced to a part-time team of just 3 officers, continues to receive British government funding. Her parents, Kate and Gerry McCann, continue to maintain the Find Madeleine campaign and have never stopped looking. On the 18th anniversary of their daughter's disappearance, they wrote publicly that their determination to leave no stone unturned remained unwavering. The case of Madeleine McCann is a haunting reminder of how quickly an ordinary evening can turn into a lifelong nightmare. A little girl walked into a holiday apartment and never came home. A family's world was shattered in a single hour, and an entire continent has spent nearly 2 decades searching for answers that so far have never come. Whether justice will ever be served remains one of Europe's most painful and unresolved questions. But for Kate and Gerry McCann, the search is not over. It never will be until they know the truth.